hiring people with less skills in a particular area and training them up. I'm a big supporter of that because I think for me, it's more about the aptitude and the desire to learn than about the specific skills that a person. That's part of what we do in tech and security is we're always learning something new.
Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Hey Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey Brendan, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to talking with you today. So before we dive in, I would love to hear a little bit about you, your background, and what you're working on these days.
Okay. So I've been in the security space for, 20 plus years. I actually started in security in the late 90s, middle to late 90s. It's been an interesting career for the, first probably 15 years. I was an engineer and architect and doing most of the technical work and really involved at that level. I mean, I really enjoyed the tech side of it. That was pretty much that was my passion. It was my calling at that time. And then probably 2011 timeframe, I, made the decision to shift into leadership. I wanted kind of another challenge, and I figured that was the opportunity. I'd been asked to move into leadership before that and, still wanted to remain very technical. So in 2012, I finally, made the move into leadership and then really discovered that actually was my calling, that I love the technical side of it. And I think having a good, solid, understanding of kind of the security industry and doing all that I did really helped pave the path for me moving forward. So when I got into the leadership, I loved it. I approached it from an engineering architecture lens and started putting pieces in place and experimenting with different items and trying different approaches and had a lot of success with the first program I built out. And it was a lot of fun. And I like mentoring people and educating and helping move things forward and like working with teams. And it was fun. And then so spent 8 years at 13 years at Realtor.com, but 8 years in a leadership capacity. And then after that, I actually ended up joining Postman in October of last year. And I've been here for 8 months now and basically coming in here to revamp the security program, take it to the next level. It's a fast growing startup that has reached that point where we really need to be able to scale the security program. And for the size of the company I had at Realtor, I was able to do a lot of scaling and actually optimization of the security program with very limited staff. And then coming into Postman, I've now got a lot more staff, but there's a lot more need to do the scaling. So that's top of mind items right now. And what I'm working on is, how do I scale out application security? How do I scale out security engineering in a very cloud, first organization or cloud only organization? So it's pretty exciting. It's fun to build it out. And I also own IT now too. So that's a new change, a new welcome addition to my team, essentially.
I'd love to touch on leadership, and I think this episode's going to probably focus mostly on leadership, as I haven't touched on this topic much. So from your perspective, would you say it's a black and white move? If you want to move into a leadership role, do you have to let go of your love for technology, your hands-on, get in the weeds approach, or is there a way to balance both out? Because my example would be a CISO. Like, how does a CISO have the time to still be hands-on and technical?
Yeah. When I first moved in, when I became the manager of information, definitely was a very hands-on manager. So I was managing the team and also getting, deep into the technology and helping with kind of architecture and decisions. As I've, moved up the ranks and moved into kind of more CISO level roles and senior leadership, there's definitely you do have to let go of some of it. But I think I like remaining in the weeds to a certain extent within reason. So it is a balancing act. But I think it definitely helps me to be able to understand what my team's talking about, understand the approaches they're recommending. Because I think if you don't really understand where they're coming from and the technical details they're dealing with or the incidents, then it becomes hard because then there's that disconnect. So I think it is hard from a time standpoint, but I think it is important to still remain somewhat plugged into kind of the technical side of it.
It's not a natural transition for everyone. So would you say moving into leadership roles, it's a gut instinct? It's coming from your peers? Like, when do you start to think about this transition?
I think everybody comes to the realization at different times. I've mentored a lot of folks and talked to a lot of folks about when to do it and whether it's right. And it's not for everyone. So I had previous opportunities and actually even, previous stints at running a security team. And, when I was at an engineering company, I was doing it for a period of time. And at that time, it wasn't right for me. So I think everybody has their own path to get to it. I think for me too, the place that I got to, learn and be the leader for the first time with an actual team, I was given a lot of kind of flexibility to figure things out and learn on my own and experiment. And to me, that was fun because it was always enjoyed about tech in general. It's just experimenting, trying new approaches and seeing what works. And when it doesn't work, failing fast and trying it again. So I think everybody has a different path to get there.
And what would you say are like some of the main misconceptions around leadership?
Tough problem. That's an interesting question. I mean, I'd say it's not just managing. Leadership is definitely not just managing, because a manager is just making sure that one thing happens, but a leader gets people to want to do things. So there's an aspect of motivation behind it. There's an aspect of vision behind it, right? You want people to buy into the vision, the thought process, and you want them to support and want to work on these efforts and want to improve things. I think that's a difference between a leader who's really trying to lead the charge and do something different or move into it, improve things in a certain way, versus somebody that's just managing and connecting the dots from A to B.
And do you by any chance have a recent example or an example of where you were able to lead your team by buy-in versus this is what we're doing, go do it?
That's the bulk of how I generally manage my teams anyways. I'm definitely very much a futurist and an idea person. So I like to talk about what the potential is, and I like to get my teams on board with, here's what we can be doing, here's what things can look like, and try to get them excited about it. A perfect example is just we've been revamping the way we do alerting and monitoring within our program. I'm coming up with ideas on some interesting ways to solve it, and bringing this up to the team saying, hey, look, if we did this, here's some additional benefits we could get out of this. Here's how cool this would look. I always like to sell them on the fact that, look, if we do something like this, we can really, we're being innovative. And next year we could be talking about this at a conference, things like that. I want them to see that this could be something that benefits the company and in turn benefits them, that this is something that, we could be proud of at the end of it. So I think there's a sense of pride in selling the approach and getting others to really want to do it, not just do it because they have to.
Sticking on this topic for a bit, do you think there is a fine line between getting the buy-in versus just getting it done? I would say certain cultures, there is a more collaborative, like everyone needs to agree before we move forward, versus having someone that is a leader that what the leader says, the crowd follows. Is there a fine line between leading and, I don't know what's the right word, executing on the plan or the company vision?
Yeah, I mean, there probably is a fine line. I like to empower my teams to, be able to make decisions and give them a certain sense of autonomy with what they're doing. And I subscribe to the methodology of I'd rather you ask for forgiveness rather than permission. Everything we do, we should take risks. We should try different approaches. I'm not going to be upset because somebody tried an approach that didn't work. I'd be upset if they just sat around and didn't do anything, or I wouldn't be upset, but I would be, disappointed. So I'd much rather them try new things, learn from it, circle back and say, okay, you know what, this didn't work. Let's try a new approach. I mean, I think that's the kind of, people I like to have within my team, is the very curious ones who want to try a new approach to something, who want to solve something, who really have this innate desire to find a unique way to solve it and are willing to take risks to accomplish that.
So as a leader at Postman, what would you say are some of the hiring challenges that you're facing these days as your company is scaling?
There's a lot of them. I think the first one is just competition. There's a lot of demand for security professionals. It's hard to find them. And when you do find them, you got to move on them pretty quickly. I think salaries are another kind of difficult component. Salaries are really all over the place from a cybersecurity standpoint. We need to stay plugged into our industry and make sure that we understand what is the market data. Most of the market data that HR teams have is generally out of date by the time we're looking to hire somebody. So that's challenge number 2, just because there's so much fluidity within the cybersecurity space. Titles are an interesting thing too, because it's not really super standardized. You have a lot of just a security engineer that may be doing application security or cloud security or doing a ton of different areas. So having an apples to apples comparison of a title in one company to another is just, it's not there. So it's really hard to level set and say, this is the type of person I need. And let me go source these types of candidates at other roles.
And you're obviously in a competitive industry and location. So what are some of the salary challenges that you're thinking of creative ways of overcoming? Like, what do people care about other than salary that you can speak to and provide?
I mean, definitely salary is important, and we do a lot to try to at least be very competitive from a salary standpoint. But aside from that, what we also do is alongside benefits and equity and those types of items, but I really try to create a fun and rewarding environment for anybody that comes in. So I want, people to know that they can come into my program and have an impact and be part of building something special. And it's part of, like, when I interview somebody, I want to make sure that they understand this is a chance to be part of something that's growing, and you can have your foot in the door at the very beginning. So there's a ton of potential for really impacting kind of the way we do things at Postman. And to me, I think it's no different than how I was as an engineer. You definitely want to have an impact. You want to be able to contribute. You want your voice to be heard. And I make sure that I convey that to any potential candidates, is that everybody's going to have a voice. Everybody has the potential to really impact the way we do things. And I always tell people, anything we do, nothing is sacred. So any existing processes or an existing way of doing things, there will be a chance to highlight, to recommend better ways of doing it and then make improvements to it. And I think the growth path and the ability to learn new things. I mean, I love learning, and most of my, team, they all love to learn and pick up new topics. So I think I also try to highlight those types of things. So it's not just the money, but it's also the opportunity and the growth path.
When you're having these interviews, do you pick up that people are interested in more than just the salary? Does it vary based on whether they're entry level, mid level, or experienced? What are some of the motivators that you see a trend with these days?
I definitely see they want to know that they can have an impact and grow. They want to see that there's an opportunity for training, for mentorship, the ability to, contribute to key programs, the ability to have some level of mobility in ancillary areas within security. And that's something I even do within my program. Is I have various teams: SecOps, application security, product trust, but I create a mobility within those teams so that somebody working in AppSec can also contribute to SecOps, or vice versa. Teams working in governance can also contribute to security engineering. That way, that gives them the chance to, be part of more than just what their, individual specific domain is, but really grow across their knowledge across all of security. That's ultimately, the more knowledge we gain, the more marketable we are. I want people to feel like they're growing so that they can go get that next step somewhere else. I don't expect everybody I'd love for them to come work for me forever and never leave. I do understand that people are going to leave. And if they move on to something better, I'm proud of them when they actually end up leaving. So I think I'm doing my job if I'm getting them ready for the next level.
Many folks that I've heard and spoken with on LinkedIn, there are a lot of vocal folks who will tell you there's no training, you need to hit the ground running. So as a scaling company, what is your philosophy on hiring? Are you open to training people that are coming with less experience, giving opportunities? I'm just curious now that you're in the phase of hiring.
Yeah, definitely. I think training, it should be part of the job anyways. I think even people that come in from an experience standpoint, we still want to train them on our way of doing things. We still want to train them on our company practices and just our standard deployment procedures and our security processes. To the point of the question, hiring people with less skills in a particular area and training them up, I'm a big supporter of that, because I think for me, it's more about the aptitude and the desire to learn than about the specific skills that a person. That's part of what we do in tech and security, is we're always learning something new. I think change is the only constant that we actually have. As the environment continues to change and new tech is used and the business continues to evolve, we have to deal with constant change. So there's always going to be a training component of that. So bringing on people that want to make a difference, even if they don't have the skills or attributes that you look for, as long as they have the desire and the passion, to me, that's worth its weight in gold.
Would you disagree or agree training programs are more suited for larger companies?
No, I disagree. I think they're suited for any size company.
So what does that entail? How can companies with less resources train people up while still attending to the business?
If you don't train people, then you actually run into issues with whether it's mistakes being made or having to repeat things over and over again. So there is a cost to not training people. So I think, it's definitely in the company's best interest to spend some time. They don't have to be official, very extensive training programs, but even mentoring to a certain extent, there is a certain level of training or helping somebody along. So that type of knowledge sharing is important. There's specialized training too. When I was at Realtor, we actually had an onboarding training program for any new engineer starting within the company, from just general engineering, software developers and all that. The intent was it was all, homegrown training and stuff that we had put together ourselves. And engineers, after the first week of being onboarded, got a ton of value out of being trained on our way of doing things. And here's the security program. Here's who to contact. Even those types of things are hugely valuable, which a lot of companies don't do. And that's something we're working on here at Postman, is how do we actually do more onboarding training? How do we introduce people to the Postman way of doing things and our tools and processes and our techniques and all that? And I think there's a lot of value in even starting with that level of training.
Would you say that you hire kind of entry-level cybersecurity and info security folks, or do you have a bar of experience that is required? Are you giving those folks a chance?
So in India, we actually have a fairly successful internship program. So we've been bringing in literal entry-level people, and they've been coming into our AppSec team. And, the quality of people we have is amazing. These are individuals that are hungry, that really are eager to learn new items, that are very trainable too, right? They want to learn. And we've had a ton of success with those folks. And some of them have moved on to, bigger and better, which is part of what you want. But some of them, after the internship, they've remained within the company. I think that's a great approach. And that's something we're actually looking to apply to our U.S. offices as well, as some type of internship, apprenticeship type program. I think there's a lot of value in bringing in those entry-level people and really creating your own security people. It's what I had when I initially formed the security program at Realtor too. My initial 4 hires were actually people that did not have security backgrounds, a background in like Active Directory administration or change management or even help desk, but they all had a desire to learn security. So spent a lot of time mentoring them and training them, and basically I created security people. I created people that actually wanted to be in the industry, and they're all still in the industry. This is, so they've been in the industry now for 9 years, and some of them are doing extremely well. And it's nice to see, like they found their calling to a certain extent by me giving them that opportunity.
So would you mind elaborating a little bit and walking us through your hiring process?
Sure. So at a high level, it starts with kind of defining the need for a person. Once we've identified that we're doing a lot of work with an AppSec and we've identified the need for that individual, the next step is really crafting up a job description. And I think there's a lot to be said about, writing up, because you see posts on LinkedIn all the time about these job descriptions looking for a unicorn. I think there's a lot. We need to make these job descriptions really crisp and simple, and just, hey, here's what you're going to be doing. Here's what we're looking for. I don't like to focus too much on some of the specific skills and attributes, even experience. We might put, if we're looking for a mid-level person, we're looking for 5 years, but none of these things are set in stone. It's 5 years would be nice. If I find somebody that's really eager to learn and has done it can talk about some interesting projects they've been involved with, and they've only been doing it for 2 years, I'm perfectly fine hiring those types of individuals as well. But getting the job description down is important. Recruiting is another key piece. It's not just the recruiting from the HR standpoint, the recruiting team, but I do a lot of my own recruiting. So I leverage all the different networks I'm a part of. I leverage LinkedIn. Any chance I have to talk with peers or talk with others in the security space, find some individuals who may have some interest. I get a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn. It's part of the job is constant recruiting, because I'm looking for those next gen talents, right? Those next caliber of individuals that want to come work for me, want to come work for Postman. So then from a hiring, or, once we've got kind of candidates in the pipeline, the next step is the interview cycle, right? Now, I like to keep the interviews at 4 or less. I've seen a lot of posts too about people claiming a ridiculous number of interview cycles. And for me, 3 to 4 is usually good. It's a hiring manager interview and a couple kind of technical people. And depending on who the person's reporting to, I may interview them. So during that process, for me, I'm not looking for specific skill sets or attributes. I'm looking for kind of passion and desire. And is security just another job to them, or is this something that they're really interested in and they want to grow in and they want to contribute to?
CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES. an AI-powered, self-learning email security platform that helps security professionals proactively prevent, detect, and remediate phishing attacks in a matter of seconds, not hours or days. And we have an exclusive offer for our podcast listeners. Discover dormant phishing threats in your organization's mailboxes. Get a free 90-day scan back with a detailed report. Integrate in seconds with 2 clicks via API to Microsoft Office 365 and see what your current email security is missing. Go to ironscales.com/free scan to learn more.
We hear about this term gatekeepers, and I'm just curious to hear from you. Have you experienced that in your past? Is it still something very prominent today? And how do you mitigate that scenario where someone is being the gatekeeper based on preconceived notions or an old mentality of hiring?
Part of that is I stay very connected to my HR team and all the resumes that are coming through. So even the ones that they do reject, I like to take a look at them and glance over them and make sure that we're not rejecting people for whatever reason. I want to get a better understanding of that. I also, whenever my team passes on somebody, I like to sit down with them and say, especially the person that had probably maybe the negative feedback or that gave them a thumbs down, I like to sit down and say, okay, what is it that you were passing on? What is it that you were looking for? And why did this person not meet the objective? And really try to get them to think about it differently as well, to look at the potential of the person versus just the list of things that they had on their resume. Because I think we're betting on the future potential of this person and what value they can provide to the program versus just looking at what's written on the resume.
So what do you look for when reviewing resumes? Because you can get, 10 a day, 100. How do you streamline that? And what advice can you give to both job seekers and employees when reviewing resumes?
I look for accomplishments if they can call out some type of accomplishment, especially in some way to measure it. I did 25% deployed a process to 25% of the company, reduced the amount of time it takes to do a vulnerability scan by 50%, whatever, something along those lines where you can see that they understood the impact of what it is that they worked on, and then they can talk about it during the interview cycle. So I like to see accomplishments. I like to see some level of growth depending on what the role is. If it's somebody has gone from a help desk role into cybersecurity, and then you've seen them growing throughout the career, those are the kind of things I look for, and I like to see. It's really depends. It depends on the role that you're looking for, and if there's certain types of key things that you need. So, like from a program management standpoint, that's one of the roles I'm currently hiring for. I want to see do they understand enough about program management? I don't care if they're certified in any of the project management methodologies and all that. What value do they provide to their current team? And can they, do they have that listed somewhere within the resume? I think those things say a lot, right? Because to me, the resume is telling a short story, a really quick story about yourself. So it should be very focused on the role that you're trying to get.
If we can focus maybe for 1 minute on entry-level applicants, we hear a lot about I sent in 100 resumes and I got one answer, or I sent 205 responses, whatever, positive or negative, by the way.
Right.
So what can entry-level job seekers do to increase their chances of getting their first gig? What would they put on their resume? Is resume the best way to go for entry-level job seekers? Should they look at other channels, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things, right? The resume definitely is a little bit more challenging when you don't have a whole lot of experience to jot about it, but they can list out certain projects that they may have worked on or personal type of efforts. And, there's a lot of things we do throughout our day-to-day lives that may have an impact on security. So if we can, show that when I was in this particular role that I still was actually handling security, because, when I was a network engineer way back in the 90s, I was still managing security. When I moved into my first security team, I actually used that. So yeah, I've been managing firewalls and ACLs for many years, even though I wasn't a security professional. So if you find creative ways to show that your experience does relate to the job that you're applying to, I think that can go a long ways, because it goes back to telling that story about who you are and what you've done. The other thing too is showing the projects that you've been involved with. If you've done any kind of open source or contribute to that, show those types of projects, even little kind of side projects that you've done. If you wrote a tool to do some automated, scanning of something, I think all of those things can help tell that story and help get your foot in the door. That's just from the resume standpoint. But then there's also, like you said, other avenues, right? So looking for kind of the internship, apprenticeship types of programs. You'll see them, folks will post them within LinkedIn. I think another key thing is they should join, look for a cybersecurity Slack community or some type of forum that exists out there, and find those job boards. networking and talking to other folks is probably the best way to go about finding a position. If it wasn't for networking, I wouldn't have my current job today. This wasn't a job posting anywhere. This wasn't anything that I found. This was basically word of mouth through a couple of individuals. So I think there's a lot of value in actually approaching those different ways of finding the next role.
Do you recommend folks write a cover letter? And if they do, what should they put there? What could help them stand out?
To be honest, I don't ever look at the cover letters. So I want to jump right into the resume. And if you're looking at lots of resumes, this is just my approach, but I've never really paid attention to the cover letters. I've never used cover letters whenever I apply anywhere. For me, it's, I think you can capture a lot in kind of a simple 1-paragraph objective within your resume, and then just jump into the story. And for me, when I think of the resume, my resume is 1 page. And the whole goal of it is they're going to start at the top and see something about myself. And then I'm going to have my last job and kind of some details about that and some major accomplishments. And then, I just list out a few extra bullets that talk about the rest of my employment history. But the whole goal is the point of the resume is just to get that first conversation. If you can land that first conversation, then you take it from there on telling the full in-depth story. So it's just enough to entice their interest. I think the less is more, to be honest.
Moving to post resume, how do you conduct your interviews? Do you have a formula? Like, how do you go about interviewing candidates?
I've always tried to make candidates feel comfortable. It's a nerve-wracking process and nerve-wracking on both sides at times. I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing. I want to make sure that if they're a good fit for me, that I'm also a good fit for them. I like to make it conversational. I like to be very nice and courteous because I think we should just be doing that in general. But goal number one is just give them an overview of the company, of what I'm trying to build, and get them to see that this is an interesting thing, right? And to a certain extent, already selling them on, this is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to build. There's a lot of potential here. And then I hand it over to them saying, okay, just, give me a kind of high level overview of kind of your background and your last role. And what are some of your major accomplishments, things that you're proud of? And I found that to be pretty successful because the whole goal is get them to be comfortable and be able to just have a very comfortable two-way conversation with you versus a very kind of, here's a bunch of questions. Let me ask you this. Have you done this? Have you done that? I do throw out scenario-based questions along the way. How did you respond in this type of scenario? What happens if a risk owner, somebody who owns an application doesn't want to implement a control? How would you approach it? I'm looking for certain types of answers. But not that there's necessarily a wrong or right answer either. I just want to hear their thought process and kind of the way they would rationalize it. I think one of the big things too, and a piece of advice for anyone, don't be afraid to say you don't know something. I'd much rather somebody say that, hey, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure I could find it. Be honest about it versus trying to make something up or trying to just bullshit somebody. Essentially, if you're going to add fluff around something or if you're going to guess at something, then be very honest about that and saying, I think it would be this, but I'm not entirely sure. I'd much rather hear straight honesty because we can't know it all. Google is my friend. I Google everything. So there's plenty of things that I was trained on 20 years ago. I'll still find myself Googling it because I've, forgotten what the details of it. So I don't expect everyone to know, everything, what this standard means. What does that standard mean? What does this acronym mean? I don't think that proves anything. I don't think that tests anybody on anything.
And the thank you note, is it a must have or a nice to have?
I personally like them because to me, it shows that because again, they're also interviewing me and seeing if it's a good fit for them. So when they send off a thank you note saying, hey, I like the role, really interested in seeing where this can go, that also tells me that they are indeed interested in the role. That's a good thing. I think this thank you note also does something else too, right? If they send that over, it keeps their name fresh in my mind. So I know that they've sent over something because it's also about establishing that relationship. Just because somebody doesn't get hired by me within my team doesn't mean that A, I won't have other opportunities in the future, or B, that I don't know other people or there's other roles that I might recommend them for. So I've passed on certain individuals, not because they weren't super smart or super great, but because we had found someone else. And I've recommended those individuals to other folks who are looking for, somebody similar. So I think the thank you note kind of keeps you in that person's mind and shows your interest and establishes that relationship.
And after getting the job, what advice would you give to employees in the first 30 to 90 days?
Good question. First thing is spend a lot of time listening. Make sure you're clear with your direct manager what the goals are and what you want to accomplish. But I would listen a lot and ask a lot of questions. I think that's really what I want to see out of somebody for the first 30 days. I want to see that they're absorbing a lot of the information and that they want to get better understanding of the way things work or why we're doing something. And then after the first 30 days of getting acclimated to the environment, I think there's the next 60 to 90 days is really, okay, let's define a few kind of key objectives or key kind of goals that we want to accomplish and keep them simple just to get them up to speed. It takes a while to onboard anybody, and I'd much rather give them the time to learn and to get acclimated to the environment and to gel with the team and find ways to integrate versus giving them a bunch of kind of unrealistic tasks to begin right at the beginning, just to start off with. We've done a pretty good job of kind of putting together an entire checklist of everything we want them to review within the first month. Read this, read that, go attend this meeting, sit with this person, ask some questions. We also have, obviously, Postman. We're an API development platform. So we have part of their, the first month is create a collection, demo it to the company, those kind of things. So I think keeping the tasks high level and simple and focusing on kind of them learning the environment is important. And from an employee standpoint, they should be asking lots of questions. They should be listening and learning wherever possible.
The last time we spoke about this, you talked about, and I think you mentioned it a bit earlier in this episode as well, creating an environment people don't want to leave. You had a lot to say about building that environment and increasing retention of your existing employees, because I think a lot of companies don't pay attention to retaining the talent once you've gotten them. It's hard enough getting people, so we may as well keep them. It only makes sense, unless they're terrible, obviously.
Exactly, yeah. Aside from those types of cases, if you have good people, my job is to keep them on the team and keep them here as long as possible and make sure that they're happy. And I'm a servant leader, so my job is to make sure that, I'm doing everything I can for the employee, for them to be their best self. Investing in them, I'm giving them training, giving them opportunity for mentorship. I'm letting them contribute to different areas that they may not have contributed to, giving them a sense of ownership over some of the projects they work on. Some of the other things I do, we have like monthly hack days or innovation days where it's a chance to work on things that you normally wouldn't work on. I think that giving people the ability to venture out into different areas, it really helps, it really helps drive them forward, gives them an ability to learn something new. And like I said, most the engineers really want to learn more, and they love learning and they love trying new things. So I like to cultivate that type of environment. I also like to cultivate, one of the things I've done within my teams over the years is I use like the Gallup Strengths Finder to identify what are the key strengths that each team member has. And then I find ways to pair up individuals who have a certain strength and their top strengths. So somebody that's really good at kind of strategy and vision, and pair them up with somebody that's really good at executing. And that makes them higher performers. And when you perform and you deliver, then, that's to a certain extent, you feel good about it. And then you want more of that. So I think that's part of it too, is cultivating those successes. I also make sure that I brag about my team. I make sure that I celebrate their successes, and I want to, ensure that it's their successes. And we're all one team. And I always tell my teams that it's not my team, it's our team. And I, want to make sure that their voices are heard, but I want them to have, just as much skin in the game as I do. This is our team. If one of us is failing, then, we all got to step in, and how do we actually make the team get better? I think those types of environments definitely help them because everybody feels like they can contribute. Everybody feels like they can provide some kind of value. Everybody feels like they have the opportunity to learn and to grow. And in my experience, I know that me as an engineer, when I was an engineer, that's what I wanted. And that's what drove me. When I got the training and I got the opportunities, that's what I enjoyed the most.
Would you agree or disagree that most companies don't train their technical folks with soft skills to become leaders?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that's something that I've seen more of it happening. But when I first moved into leadership, I had no kind of soft skill or leadership type training. It took many years before, I finally got that. I learned most of my leadership skills pretty much either on the job, just from kind of trial and error, or really, I always tried to mimic not even mimic, but I learned from various leaders I had throughout my career, the ones I really, that I liked working for, and also the ones that I didn't feel were great leaders. And I learned to not do the things that they were doing. So I, went in with that kind of mindset saying that, all right, how am I going to differentiate myself and be different than what I'm used to and really cater to the engineers and the team first mentality. But I do think that, there should be more training around these types of efforts, around teaching leaders empathy and teaching them how to deal with kind of the employee, retention type issues and simple things like writing job descriptions and all that kind of stuff.
As we come up to the end of the episode, is there anything we missed that you would like to add before we close out?
Sure. Yeah. One thing is we need to spend more time with HR. We really need to partner with HR from a salary standpoint, from helping craft the job descriptions. I even partnered with my marketing and PR type companies to ensure that from a job description standpoint, it has a good message and kind of shares the company kind of philosophy, even within the job descriptions. So partner with your various teams. I think that's important. Also, as leaders of security, we need to really understand what are the market conditions, what are the salary, because salary is all over the place. How are others approaching kind of salary discussions, and what are the ranges that people are seeing out there, so that then we can go back to HR and work with them. HR will give us a number, but we need to go back to HR saying, look, we're the experts in this area. Here's the data that we're seeing, and we need to influence HR. We need to make sure that they understand that we are the experts in this area, and that they need to modify those numbers. I've had a lot of success with that too. I think that's probably one of the most important things I've been doing lately is, really working a lot with HR to make sure that they're selling the role and that the numbers and expectations that they're setting are actually realistic.
And post pandemic, quote unquote, because it changes every month. But would you say the dynamic between local and international recruiting, or even interstate, has significantly changed? Have you found any challenges? Has it been a positive, unexpected event?
Sure, definitely. I think there's been some unexpected benefits, or to a certain extent expected. So now that it's a work from home type of scenario, it opens up the pool of talent to places that we normally wouldn't have, hired from. So I think that's been great. The fact that companies that are remote first, and we've been a remote first company, and we're really moving more towards that model. It's great to be able to hire wherever you find the right talent. So I just hired somebody in Australia that started last week. And it's nice to be able to find somebody that's a good fit for the company, and that they don't have to be local to my office. I'm a remote employee. Our headquarters is in San Francisco, and I'm in Southern California. So the availability of talent and the places you can work definitely has been a benefit. And I think that'll be a benefit moving forward for the companies that continue to stay remote or that still offer those remote options. The difficulty, though, has been that because there are so many companies hiring remote, there's a challenge with kind of how do you level set salaries. And I think that's why salaries are really all over the place, because the two big metro areas, the Bay Area, San Francisco, and then New York, are really where you have those high salary areas. But because now people in the Midwest and other states they have access to that talent, but that talent is already making that kind of money. You're finding a lot of companies that are actually paying those individuals the San Francisco or New York rates. So I think it has done a little bit to drive up salaries across the board. In general, I think the additional salaries is still not a big issue when you're actually getting access to that much more talent. And now you can actually fill the role to somebody that is really going to make an impact.
Yeah, and it's potentially also increasing diversity if you're working interstate and internationally.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. Gives us access to people and options that we didn't have before.
And different ways of thinking. A lot of people always talk about cybersecurity is all about solving problems. So if you all think the same, you're probably going to be limited in the solutions that you can come up with.
Diversity of thought. And I mean, that's why I think it was a podcast from Alan Alford with Andy Ellis, the prior CISO of Akamai. And he was talking about just some of the creative hiring he did within Akamai. And he was bringing on teachers to actually do security awareness training, or security awareness and security training. He was bringing on journalists to do some of the tech writing from a cyber standpoint. He was bringing on librarians to manage kind of governance processes, since they're very good at managing, cataloging information and understanding that. So I think that's, we want that diverse thought, people from different backgrounds to bring something new to the table. We talk about a talent shortage, but I don't think we need to think creatively about it. I think we have plenty of people who want to be in cyber. It's just a matter of finding places for them and thinking outside the box.
100% agree with you there. So Josh, this has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights. If anyone listening has follow-up questions or would like to connect with you, where's the best place that they can find you?
The best place is you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can hit us up on our careers page, postman.com/careers. And you'll see there's some cybersecurity positions open there. But LinkedIn is the place that I'll most likely respond in a quick manner. And we are hiring. We've got probably 12 to 15 positions open right now, and definitely looking for some good talent.
Awesome. So we'll be sure to include that in the show notes, and we'll give you a quick shout out on LinkedIn before the episode goes live, just to see if we can help boost some of that recruiting process. Thanks again, Josh, for joining us on CyberSecurity Heroes, and to the rest of you, we'll see you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of CyberSecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.